Hi, Elise Dewsberry here from New Musicals Inc. And I am starting the 7th year of my monthly vlog, How to Get No Feedback from Elise. So by now, any of you who've been watching this up until now know that, of course, I love musicals. Musicals are my life. I live, eat, breathe, sleep, read, critique, and see musicals all the time. So that's no surprise to anyone. What might be a surprise to some people is that I'm also a Trekkie and have been since I was about, I don't know, since I was in the 7th grade, which I think would probably have been the first reboot of the original series. And we used to get together after, on the recess ground and talk about last night's episode. And so I followed all the series and liked some of them more than others, but I've religiously watched all the series, all the movies, and all the spin-offs. And so now that there's so many on the streaming services, of course, I've been checking out all of those as well. So I don't know if you heard about this, but recently they announced that there was going to be a musical episode of Strange New Worlds, which is one of the current offshoots of the series. And this basically covers the time period prior to when James Kirk was the captain of the Enterprise. It's when Captain Pike was starting his crew. So we meet Uhura and Spock and Bones. Have we met Bones yet? We might not have met Bones yet. But Nurse Chapel, and we just met Scotty in one of the episodes. So we're getting to know the people that will become the main characters in the original series, but when they're younger. And so when I heard that they were going to make a musical episode, I'll admit I paled. I was really nervous because I didn't really see how those two worlds could intersect. And there's a tone to Star Trek that I thought was not going to lend itself to any kind of a traditional musical the way I knew it, and I was really nervous they were going to blow it. So I watched it, and I have to say, I was incredibly impressed. And there's a lot of reasons why I was impressed. So I thought I would talk about that a little bit, about how the writers handled making a musical episode of Strange New Worlds and why I think it's so good. Because I think that many of the things that they did are things that I always feel any musical should do. And so that's why, in my opinion, it worked. So for instance, there was a real reason why they sang. They didn't just suddenly break out into song. I'll talk about it in a minute, but there was an actual reason why people were singing. And the songs were all true to the characters who sang them, and the overall thing was true to the tone of the show. So it was really quite extraordinary. So let me tell you a little bit more about it. It was called Subspace Rhapsody. It was produced by Akiva Goldsman and Henry Alonzo Myers, the producers of the show. It was written by Dana Horgan and Bill Wolkoff, directed by Dermot Downs, with original songs composed by Kay Hanley and Tom Pulse. Good on you, Kay and Tom. So I went online and I read some of the interviews about how this all happened. So I'm going to read some of that to you. They interviewed Akiva and Henry, the producers, about how all this came about. And Akiva said that it went all the way back to season 1 of Star Trek Picard, one of the earlier spin-offs, when he and his co-showrunner, Michael Chabon, I believe it's pronounced, they were talking about the possibility of having a musical episode. And Chabon said, hey, I happen to know Lin-Manuel Miranda. So one of the actresses on the show, Michelle Hurd, overheard this and went, oh my God, you got to call him. And then 3 days later, when Michael came in, Akiva said, well, did you call him? And Michael said, yes, I did, but he never called me back. So there was never a musical episode for Picard, for the series Star Trek Picard. But Akiva went on to say that he really loves musicals, but really doesn't know anything about them. But then he found out that his writing partner, Henry, or his producing partner, Henry, had done musicals before. And so he thought, well, that's fantastic. I don't know what we're biting off, but clearly Henry does. So then this interview went over to speak to Henry for a while, and he said that when they were pitching season 2 of Strange New Worlds, which is what just happened and wrapped up, I don't think that the musical episode was the final episode of season 2, but it's quite near the end. And Bill Wolkoff, who's one of the writers, had this crazy idea and said, hey, let's do a musical. And he said, let's just give that a try. And he said that he'd done a bunch of musicals on The Magicians and did one once on Ugly Betty, a musical version. So, but he also knew what a giant pain in the butt it would be. But he started making calls like 6 months ahead of time to try and figure out how to do this. But the most important thing is they knew that it had to be built around the story and the theme that already existed for these characters and for this season. And it had to be tailored to the vocal ranges of the particular actors. Now, they were lucky that some of their actors are already Broadway singers, and some of them aren't. So they were able to sort of figure out who could sing more, who could sing less, who could be given something more challenging. How could you make it so that everybody had their moment to shine? He also said that it was really important to him that it shouldn't be a funny episode. People would sort of expect coming, and that was one of the things I was nervous about is, well, let's turn it into a joke. It's a musical. But he said he wanted it to be something that breaks your heart and makes you want to cry, and that the moments when there are songs have to be true moments that are about true character things. Really important stuff, right? So the episode itself, the way it happens is that it starts with, I think it's Uhura and Spock are investigating some kind of, space anomaly of some kind, like they often are. It was a naturally occurring fold in subspace, which you have to explore, of course. So Ensign Uhura, who's played in this series by Celia Rose Gooding, suggested that maybe they should scan the phenomenon with music and test its properties. So they started sending a signal about sending a musical signal to this anomaly, and instead of doing what they thought it was going to, it created a tear in space-time that plunged the crew into an alternate reality in which everyone started singing. But they were singing only their most intense and intensely private moments. They didn't sing everything. If they had really, really intense feelings, they sung them. Sound familiar? Yeah. So the writers knew what the characters had to go through in the episode, right? Because they had, the Bible for the season. They knew what had to happen to connect it to previous episodes and keep things going forward. They didn't want it to be like a standalone. So they knew where they had to start and where they were going, and they wanted to make sure that everything would connect from one end to the other. Let's see. So they said that they knew what the story was going to be. They shared the story with the composer and the lyricist, what the basic story was going to be, and then had the composer and lyricist send back ideas, and then they gave them thoughts. So they went back about that. And the writers who were writing the episode were very heavily involved with the songwriting team who were writing the songs. They said they were trying to make sure that all the stuff that they were coming up with linked with what we were coming up with. So the two sides needed to make sure everything gelled, sort of like a book writer and the composer lyricist having to make sure that everything works together. They really wanted the show to feel like the actual show, like I say, not just some kind of standalone thing. But the songwriters wanted it to feel like a musical, so they were trying to figure out how could they meet in the middle. So then Myers, let me just check my notes. That would have been, trying to see who they're talking about there. Sorry, I think I lost that in my notes. So whoever that was, somebody said, so there's an emotional thing that's supposed to happen. And we know the beginning, we know the end, and we know the emotions that happen in the middle. And there's story scenes, so that the song can't just be a song that describes things you already know. It has to be a scene that reveals something. Yeah? Have you heard me say that before? That a song needs to be a discovery, a revelation, an epiphany, a confrontation, something, but it needs to reveal something. And so then they said, now that you know that, they said to the songwriting team, now go and come back when you have something interesting. So what resulted from that was an episode in which characters only sang when their emotions were high. They started to figure out that was happening. They knew it was happening to them, which was sort of interesting. And they knew that it was their security officer decided it was a security risk because they were revealing all their innermost feelings. And she realized that that was probably not a good thing. So they had to spend the rest of the episode trying to figure out how to get it to stop. And Klingons were involved. The Klingons were like a boy band, and in order to make it, this was the fun thing. At the end of the day, Uhura figured out that in order to get it all to stop, they had to bombard this anomaly with so much music that it would, blow it up or whatever. And so everybody on the I guess is it the Enterprise? Had to sing, and then it wasn't enough. So there was a nearby Klingon ship that was causing problems, and they explained to them what was going on, and they made them sing too. So it was funny, but moving and fantastic. So it's well worth seeing. And I just really wanted to talk about how carefully they planned it, how much they understood how it had to be connected to character and theme and story. And it wasn't just, let's have some silly songs in there. So one example of that, you should go watch the episode, but one example that I particularly liked was that they came up with a song for Spock because he and Nurse Chapel have just started to have a relationship, which is very sort of, unheard of for Spock, who's supposed to be the logical guy, but he's trying to broaden himself. And so he's dumped his Vulcan girlfriend, well, not girlfriend, but, fiance. And he is hanging out with Nurse Chapel. But in an earlier scene in the mess hall, Nurse Chapel, in her big musical number, she dumps him in the number. So actively something happens. She dumps him. And then when he's on his own and he's upset about it, he sings a song, which I thought was fantastic because it was so much in Spock's character and in his diction, and yet it also involved him coming to some kind of realization. And so I looked and I found the lyrics for it. I just want to read them. So Spock sings, this is after he finds out that she wants to break up with him. He says, "This news really changes everything. I can't believe how wrong I've been. Convinced myself we shared the same feelings. I won't make that mistake again. She's happy and carefree, the opposite of me. I can do the calculus. For her, I set aside my need to analyze. Now I'm wrecked and searching for why I'm the X." I just think that's incredible, right? Because he's the logical one, and so why is he the X? Why X algebra? La la la. So it's really cool. I've got no one but myself to blame. I've betrayed my core philosophy. Unbending reason must be my true north, lest I drown in this sea of pain. I'm so dysfunctional, weak, and emotional. Feelings I just can't contain. Escaping this misery, you're breaking free. Not a possibility. I'll solve for why in my computation, but missed the vital information, the variable so devastating. I'm the X. I'm the X. I'm the X. And he realizes through this song that he's been dumped, he's the X, but also that he's not going to do that again, right? There's that section where he says, logic is what I have to stick with. It's my bad that I tried to move away from it. So he makes a discovery about himself, and the lyrics are so keyed into who he is as a person. So, and that's just one example. So I would recommend that you go have a listen, because whether you're a Trekkie or not, because as I say, I was just incredibly impressed with how they stuck to so many of the tenets that I believe in so strongly about how music needs to operate within story. And because of that, I think it came out really well, even for people like me who are huge Trekkie fans and who are huge musical fans, but who honestly thought that the two were not ever possibly going to coexist. So check it out. And that's it for this month. And toodaloo.